Everything's all upside down and messed up, you know?
Coming up, we gaze into the political crystal ball.
I think the presidential election is the most important thing that's going on right now.
One thing is clear.
Such a nasty one.
Politics is more personal than ever before. How the national election could change the game here in Alaska.
Probably the hardest lesson I had to learn as a politician is you don't always get what you want.
After a record 8 years as House Speaker, Mike Chenault reflects on Alaska's favorite sport, politics.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers. With challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers, where we explore some of the quirks in Alaska politics, as well as why it is so intensely personal here. This year, the presidential race looms large in Alaska's political landscape. Hillary Clinton has narrowed the gap in the polls with Donald Trump, enough to raise eyebrows in a state that traditionally votes red. The financial website Wallet Hub says Alaskans hold the third most powerful electoral votes in the nation because of our small population.
We only have 3 electoral votes, but when you divide it by the population, we have more electoral votes per person than just about anywhere, just by virtue of being a small state. Do people think about that when they go vote? No, I think they think the opposite, which is, oh, my vote doesn't make a difference, which is too bad, because it does.
But one seasoned Republican doesn't buy it. Jim Crawford has chaired 8 Republican presidential campaigns and is confident Alaska will remain solid red.
Donald Trump is going to win the state of Alaska. We haven't dropped a presidential election since 1964. We're not going to drop this one.
President Lyndon B. Johnson was the last Democrat to carry Alaska. Before that, Democrats reigned over the very first state legislature. Analysts say the shift to more conservative leadership took place during the oil boom. Well, to test the accuracy of those Alaska polls, it was hard to resist the urge to take our proverbial political crystal ball to the streets of Anchorage.
Well, I'm seeing a nation divided. And I think it's going to take a leader who can join us together.
Our crystal ball reflects back a genuine concern about the future.
I think the presidential election is the most important thing that's going on right now.
You know, WikiLeaks just actually came.
Didn't matter whether you were a Trump supporter.
If Trump gets elected, I think that we've got a chance.
Or not.
Donald thinks belittling women.
Hillary has her problems, but I think Trump is clearly responsible for taking this election to the lowest level in modern political history.
He'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear.
The discourse has clouded the vision for many.
Everything's all upside down and messed up, you know?
Abby Sparkman is 19, her first election, and she's disappointed.
I wish there was a candidate that I really could stand by and be totally believe in them. I felt that way about Bernie Sanders.
It's very hard because there's a lot of dirt on both of them.
Rob Drummond is a vet who served in the Middle East. What are we going to learn in this election?
We need to be careful who we nominate.
How does this election stack up in importance?
This one stands out more than any other election because there's a lot of conflict between Trump and Hillary.
Even the homeless are worried.
We are citizens, even though we're homeless.
What kind of turnout do you see?
Don't know. It's up in the air, I think.
Do you think there'll be much turnout?
I think there will be. I think in Alaska especially.
Ron Holmstrom predicts strong turnout from Democrats to avert a Trump victory, which in turn could spill over into local races.
I see a great turnover in Juneau. I see the do-nothing people leaving.
Tell us, what kind of an election do you see?
A very scary one. One that I'm not sure if our country can survive.
I think the country will come together. I think sanity will prevail. And, you know, the only question I have is really what happens after November 8th.
I am not quoting myself.
But no matter what your political persuasion, our crystal ball has one prediction that's dead on.
Our country has
November 8th can't come soon enough. Here, here. Well, still ahead, a look inside the mind of Mike Chenault.
People probably underestimate me, and that's probably the wrong thing to do for them.
How personality played a key role in the House Speaker's rise to power.
The Alaska Rural Utility Collaborative, or ARUC, partners with your community to maintain your water and sewer systems. What does that mean? As a customer, your payments go directly towards your community system, nowhere else. The local operators are your friends and family. Being part of ARUC, you receive access to system management, maintenance, and support. Your goal is our goal. ARUC, empowering communities in rural Alaska to sustainably provide safe water and sanitation services.
Air travel for Frontiers is provided by Pen Air. When business or recreation takes you anywhere across the state, Pen Air is there. The only family-owned airline serving Alaska. Pen Air, the spirit of Alaska.
You don't have to live in a big city to be a foster parent. You don't have to have a big house, a fancy car, or lots of money. What you need is a home. What you need is a heart that can open to a child who needs you. Won't you become a foster parent today? A child is waiting. Call 1-800-478-7307.
People want to know what's happening overseas. What are the kinds of things that the United States might have to become involved in? The world is complex, and we want to be able to make it more understandable.
The CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
There's an old saying, you won't find news in a newsroom, and you won't find Joe Vigil there if he can help it. To say Joe gets around is an understatement.
We came down here.
See, he's not the kind of anchor content to just read the news.
Fly from Portland to Washington.
He'd rather be out here, where the news lives. Joe Vigil and KTVA 11 News. Be there.
Alaska Democrats hope the presidential race will help them win enough seats to form a bipartisan majority in the House. Representative Mike Chenault, a staunch Republican, says they could be right. We spent some time in Kenai with Chenault this summer, who told us that even if the Republicans prevail, he doesn't want his job as House Speaker anymore, which brings to an end the longest reign as Speaker in state history. Whether in politics or just putting around with old friends.
Come on, baby, be the one.
Mike Chenault downplays his skills.
Not any of us are great, but we have good shots every once in a while, and that brings you back for more.
But don't be fooled.
Mike's a good golf player. Mike is much better than average.
And you're going to think, God, this is kind of a Bubba, you know, good old boy. Aw, shucks.
When Lindsay Holmes was a freshman Democrat, a veteran lawmaker warned her about Chenault's redneck routine.
She said, do not buy it for a minute. That man is smart as a whip. Do not ever underestimate Mike Chenault.
So why do you try to lowball your intelligence?
Maybe it helps in politics, I don't know. Yeah, I think people probably underestimate me, and that's probably the wrong thing to do for them. But, you know, I'm not a smart guy.
What's your email address?
I don't want to say.
Isn't it
No,
Nikiski Redneck?
I don't want you to say.
I
don't want you to say on this show, Rhonda.
Okay, but does your email?
My email is Nikiski_redneck.
A redneck who is proud of his large extended family and their roots on the Kenai. The house where Chenault grew up may look big, but the core is just a cabin, with sections added on as the Chenault family construction business grew and prospered. That's quite a watch, though. Chenault still wears his grandfather's gold watch, given to him when he retired from the family business. Chenault jokes about asking freshman lawmakers to kiss the watch. The view of the bluff remains the same as it was when Chenault grew up. He's still married to Tana, the young woman who worked in his grandmother's Western clothing shop. Together, they raised 4 kids, which includes an adopted son, Brandon, and a set of twin daughters.
Mike has that street smarts.
A quality the House Minority Leader admires.
I'll call Mike up and go over an issue with him, and he's underneath the car fixing the brakes.
As an electrician and construction worker, Tuck relates to Chenault.
Some of the smartest people I've ever dealt with are people that work with their hands. And Mike happens to be one of those types of guys that works with his hands that's very brilliant.
That building with the 5 stacks on top of it, we built that.
Here at the Agrium fertilizer plant, the Chenault family has a lot of history. Bill and Helen Chenault ran Quick Construction, which did a lot of the maintenance here at Agrium, and as a young man, Chenault supervised a construction crew of more than 300 workers.
Whether that was sheetrocking buildings or whether that was working out at the shop on some welding project or sandblasting or running a loader or dump truck, you name it, I've done it.
Agrium closed when Cook Inlet's supply of natural gas ran dry. Although Chenault pushed for tax credits that helped to revitalize Cook Inlet exploration, the plant remains closed.
In my opinion, it'd be great to bring this facility back.
That could depend on what happens on Exxon land near Nikiski, set aside for the Alaska Liquefied Natural Gas Project.
They bought the land and they're rehabbing it.
Chenault was one of the architects for the legislation that laid the groundwork for AKLNG.
If they ever build the LNG facility on the Kenai, this is where it'll be located at.
For now, the world energy glut threatens to tank the project, but Chenault believes the state should stay the course with AKLNG.
This project's a good project. I think it has great benefits, potential for the state of Alaska, but it has to be at the right time on the right terms.
It's been a year of discord between special sessions and battles over the state's budget crisis, but Chenault remains philosophical.
Probably the hardest lesson I had to learn as a politician is you don't always get what you want. And that's really a lesson in life.
If you could give advice to yourself when you first started out, what advice would you give to the young Mike Chenault?
Be patient.
I don't know how he's done it for 8 years.
Lindsay Holmes had a chance to work with Chenault in both the minority and the majority. She switched parties partly because of Chenault's leadership.
There are speakers who come in and lay down the law and they rule with an iron fist. And there are some who rule by being devious. And Mike doesn't do either of those. Mike is he's a very patient guy and he's a straight shooter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are others eyeing the Speaker's job, including Democrats like Chris Tuck.
I think a change in the guard is a good thing because it keeps people accountable.
So what's his biggest weakness?
Probably being Speaker for so long, a complacency that may have set in a little bit.
Come on, partner.
Whether in golf or politics, Chenault is good at the numbers.
Ooh, you guys are +1 right now.
Enough to know the odds are good the Democrats may be able to flip enough seats to change the game. But whatever happens,
oh, what a player!
Chenault will always be a player.
Let me go hit.
Up next, we hear from a man behind a new book about our state's history, plus politics of the past.
That's the problem with campaigning. You're dealing with so many other things, sweeping up after charges that have been made, that the people lose sight.
And the cost...
Campaigns of yesteryear, what they reveal about today.
I just want cremation.
Cremation specialists in Alaska.
Can I have a service before cremation?
Our staff is committed to serving your needs.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Specializing in simple cremations. Whatever your reasons are for choosing cremation, call Cremation Society of Alaska 277-2777 or in the Valley 373-8627 and on the web at alaskacremation.com.
The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is focused on curing blood cancers. You can help us by joining one of our fundraising campaigns. Train with Team in Training. Walk to light the night. Sail with the Leukemia Cup Regatta. Become a man or woman of the year or a student that saves lives. Get involved. When you do, you're not only helping patients survive, you're helping them live. Join us.
Man, you know what Alaska needs? A voice of reason? Yeah, someone who's gonna give it to us straight. Uh-huh. A real Alaskan who can tell when someone's trying to pull a fast one.
Like who? Okay. I'll do it.
Great. Can I still get my toasted marshmallow white chocolate mocha?
Reality Check with John Tracy, Thursdays at 6 and 10 on KTVA 11.
I don't know that there's an easy season when you're a meteorologist. This is a really dynamic atmosphere. We're in between some mountains. The Alaska Range, you can see it over there. We got the Chugach over here, the Kenai over here, all these inlets, this landmass, a big valley that kind of creates kind of a vortex at times. So it just is pushing and pulling, and there's a lot of different pieces to the weather puzzle out here. And it can change. You change one of those pieces, and it can just throw everything up in the air.
With the ugly personal attacks and endless campaign rhetoric, most of us have had our fill of politics of the present. But when it comes to politics of the past, time tends to soften the sting.
Right on target. Senator W.E. Brad Bradley. Brad's a man who cares about Alaska. Brad wants to help cut Alaskans' high cost of living. His tax initiative places a definite
It probably comes as no surprise that this 1978 candidate for lieutenant governor didn't support gun control. This spot is among the gems in the archives of the Alaska Moving Image Preservation Association.
Hello, I'm Rick Euling. I've run a positive grassroots campaign for the state senate. With just days to go, my opponent, Vic Fisher, has hauled out the mud. He'd have you believe I oppose local hire, the permanent fund, and programs for senior citizens.
He says he can do all of this without raising taxes. I've been dealing with that kind of stuff all my life.
You definitely kind of capture the exuberance of a young state and the optimism of a young state, just lightheartedness to some of those spots. And some of that's a reflection of what political advertising was at the time.
Mudslinging is the politics of the past. The future demands a new generation of positive leadership, and that is the unmuddied truth.
Well, those hopes certainly didn't materialize based on the way things turned out today, and the politics of the future doesn't look much brighter either. Well, politics of the past, that's something Clive Thomas knows something about. All you have to do is look at his new book, which taps his experience as a professor of political science for the past 25 years. Alaska Politics and Public Policy, which has 1,200 pages and weighs about 4.5 pounds. I had a chance to chat with him last month when he was in Anchorage to promote his book.
I got into Alaska politics, found it fascinating, done quite a bit of writing on Alaska. The last book before this one, which was published in 1999, was also a book that I did. So
well, one of the things that you've said and you've advised Cub reporters that you have to pay attention to the personalities in Alaska politics.
Or any politics, yeah. In fact, as you can see, that book is entitled Alaska Politics and Public Policy, The Dynamics of Beliefs, Institutions, Personalities, and Power. And it's a book really that is centered around the idea that politics is about interrelationships of people. Power is what makes the system work, it's the juice. And also, of course, beliefs, people's values, what they believe government should do or should not do. So really politics is about the interaction of people, certain types of communication, just like your family, your clubs, and so on. The difference in politics, of course, is that you have a structure within which you work, which is the Constitution and the institutions of government. But basically, when you boil it all down, it's about personalities. It's about likes and dislikes. People have personal conflicts, all sorts of things. So that's the way to understand it.
Do you think, though, that because our state is small in population, that we are more influenced by the power of personality?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In fact, there's a, to use a terrible political science term, there is a phenomenal characteristic known as friends and neighbors politics. I came from a village of 110 people. I was born in that village. And everybody knew one another's business, but we all knew one another personally. In this state, we have, as one of my friends in Juneau said, we have the biggest little state in the world. You know, we have a huge state geographically. But in terms of number of people, we only have 740,000. When I came here, only 400,000. So I knew all the political scientists in the state. My wife, who was a lawyer, knew most of the major lawyers in the state. And so when you have more contact, and this is particularly true in the bush, where relationships count, parties and the sort of structures that take place in medium-sized states like Michigan or Wisconsin, and certainly big states like California or Texas, you don't need those intermediaries. A lot of it is personal. For example, in Anchorage, even Anchorage, which is by far the largest city in the state, a representative can walk around their district and knock on doors. You couldn't do that in California. The Senate districts, state Senate districts in California have 585,000 people in each district, which is 2/3 the population of the entire state of Alaska.
Representative Gabrielle Ledoux in Muldoon, for example, has canvassed her whole district several times. I mean, I mean, that's an example.
Yeah, I mean, it's very close. And so, you know, you don't have the intermediaries so much, and you have weaker parties here. But so it is that way, and that's good and bad. I mean,
so tell us about some of the personalities, in your view, that have had the most influence
on the state. I think, well, I mean, I'll single out 4 or 5. I think that obviously Bill Egan did. I mean, he's kind of the George Washington of Alaska. And he was a very, you know, important figure in establishing the state. One of the things about him was he was so friendly that people would say, even if he backed into a cigarette machine, he would turn around and try to shake hands with it because he was always making friends and so on. I think that there have been, Jay Hammond obviously with the permanent fund and the dividend, though maybe he'd come to regret the dividend to a certain extent, not regret it, but had second thoughts about it. I think I would also single out several Native leaders particularly. I think that some people may remember John Sackett, Frank Ferguson, and particularly Al Adams, I think. You know, the late Al Adams. Legislators, very, very skillful politicians, were able to put together deals, were able to get a lot of important things for the Bush, sewer and water, and Frank Ferguson got basically television for the Bush.
So Hickel, Governor Walter Hickel is not in your pantheon?
Hickel, I guess I would take the Fifth Amendment on Walter Hickel. I think Hickel was, obviously, you know, he was governor twice, of course. First of all, before he came Secretary of the Interior under Richard Nixon the second time. I think that, I guess you could say, you know, Governor Hickel was kind of a gladiator for the state against the federal government for all sorts of things. Didn't care for the federal government very much, believed that the federal government had gone back on its promise to Alaska. I never figured out what that was. But I think in the case of Governor Hickel, you know, he was the David against Goliath, and in that case, Goliath won. And the federal government probably will always win. But, you know, I had contact with Governor Hickel. You could put him in the top 5 or 10. I wouldn't put him in the top 5 personally.
So let's go back to Jay Hammond, because there has been a lot of discussion this year about the permanent fund.
Oh, yeah.
Why it was started, partly because, you know, we've got a multi-billion-dollar budget crisis, and people are looking at tapping the earnings of that fund. But the other thing, too, is our governor has halved the permanent fund dividend check, and there's a good chapter in here on this. What's your sense of it?
There were probably 3 different views about what the fund should be. Obviously, they wanted to save the money for 2 reasons. One, to save it to help future generations, but also to take that much money out of the economy, which could seriously overheat the economy if you let it go into the economy. After that, some people wanted to use it to develop infrastructure, better roads, you know, more schools and so on. Some people didn't believe there should be a fund because they thought that that money should be best invested by the private sector. But the third group wanted to save it to, you know, as a rainy day fund for the future. The savings option won out in the end. And of course, we now have, as of today, I looked this morning before I came here, about $55 billion in that account. But back to the PFD, the permanent fund dividend. You know, there's a lot of debate about this. And of course, most people in the state, for good reason, don't understand or know about the origins of the fund. And as my grandmother would say, today's privileges are tomorrow's demands. So whereas in the early years of the PFD, 82, 83, 84, people saw it as kind of a windfall. Now they see it as a right. It is no longer a privilege, it is a right. And so it is the biggest hurdle to get over to deal with the state's fiscal problems. In terms of what Governor Walker did last year, it's really, restarting a conversation that we've had every time oil prices have gone down. But they've always gone up, and we've gone, whew, don't have to worry about that anymore. We can go on the way we have. He did start a conversation, and there are many parts of this conversation. One is the whole question of the PFD, restructuring the permanent fund, because there really is no other source of revenue that can give Alaska a stable economy and stop it from going through these peaks and valleys, this roller coaster ride, without, in some way or another, using the fund.
Well, your book is a lot about the past.
Yep.
But, they always say that you have to know your past to make the most of your future.
Yeah, that's what they say.
What do you see?
Well, I see, from an ideal point of view, I'm not talking about the politics of it, but from an ideal point of view, Alaska should, in some way or another, work to ensure a stable economy. Alaska has the most unbalanced economy in the United States. The natural resource-based economy, it's not going to diversify its economy. People talk about this all the time. Human beings are very ingenious animals. If it could be done, it would have been done by now. It's not going to be done. So Alaska needs to sever oil revenues from its state budget. It needs to have an independent source of revenue for its budget so that it doesn't go through these peaks and valleys. That probably is the thing that, most important thing. It's been the most important issue in the state since statehood. Is it going to happen? It may happen, but it's very slowly and incrementally, and only when people are right at the edge of the cliff. Human nature is not to deal with things until there's a crisis. So
and I guess that's what history teaches us.
Yes, absolutely.
We deal with it when the cliff is nigh.
When did you write your college paper? You wrote it at 10 o'clock the night before it was due, right? It's just human nature. It's just, I did.
I plead the fifth.
I did. That's what we do. And I think that's it. It's a bit more serious now, though, than writing a college paper at 10 o'clock when it's due at 8 in the morning. Something's got to be done. But the politics, personal ambition, all sorts of other things often gets in the way. It's a very challenging situation, and I would not want to predict what is going to happen. It may, if there's a coalition in the House, which people are talking there may be, given the election, it may move forward, but I would not want to make a prediction.
Clive says you can find his book at Barnes & Noble, both in Anchorage and in Fairbanks, the Hearthside Bookstore in Juneau, and at the University of Alaska bookstores in Anchorage and Fairbanks. Well, it's time for this chapter of Frontiers to come to an end. Thank you for watching.